there's shame around money. They don't feel as if they deserve it. So even if they know it logically, yeah, buy cash producing assets. Well, if they felt shame, if their tribe is going to look down upon them, if they've heard that rich people are greedy and evil, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, because I personally think money does not corrupt you, it reveals you.
Yes.
If you believe that, all of a sudden you start buying cash producing assets, and your friends and your family members are going to go, look at Josh, the rich guy, and then all of a sudden you feel this uncertainty. And then all of a sudden you need to lean back onto your values. What are your values? If you value cash producing assets, if you value financial freedom, if you value control and responsibility, then you'll be able to make that shift. But if you don't, and you're afraid of losing your tribe, and you still have shame around it, and you don't understand, it's going to be really hard for you to make that shift.
Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs with financial literacy and real-world strategies to build lasting wealth. I'm Josh Mettle, and I'm joined by Gino Barbaro, a multifamily investor, entrepreneur, and personal finance educator who helps people like you and me create true financial freedom. Gino started in a small pizza shop in New York. Of course, all multifamily investors started at pizza shops, right? Working long hours to support his family until he realized he was trading time for money with no leverage or freedom. That realization led him into real estate and eventually to co-found Jake and Gino. They have an awesome YouTube channel. You guys should check it out. I just watched an episode this morning on multifamily, and that's a multifamily education company that's helped thousands of investors take control of their finances and their futures. Today, Gino owns over 2,000 multifamily units and teaches others how to build wealth and support the life they really want. Gino, it's a pleasure to have you, brother. How you doing?
Josh, I'm doing great. How you doing, brother? I want to share something really quick because, you're talking about financial freedom, and my kids, I've got 6 children, ages 26 to 10, and they sent me over a meme, and they said the 3 steps to financial freedom. The first step is you start out by cutting your own grass. The second step is you start out by hiring someone to cut your grass. And step 3 is you go back to cutting your own grass. So I'm at step 3 right now. I figured, I love to cut my own grass. I never had the time. Now that I've got the time, I can go back to cutting my own grass. So just wanted to share that with you.
Man, I love that. And I have so much respect for people that can juggle a full family life like you are with 6 children, a serial entrepreneur, now turned multifamily investor. Like, kudos to you for keeping all that together. And that's a real testament. So I want to get right into this, man. I want to pull as many lessons from you as a serial entrepreneur, as an investor as possible for our audience today. So let's just start out back in the pizza days. Like, how in the world did you get from New York pizza shop to where you are today as a owner of over 2,000 rental units?
My dad, when I was 8 years old, opened up a restaurant, and I would go to work with my father at the age of 8 until about, 18, 19 years old. I went to college. But the reason why I mentioned that age of 8, we start creating our values and our beliefs around that age. And me going to work with dad, he was a hard worker. He was an immigrant. He was a saver. He didn't really like a lot of risk. He didn't really handle the money. Mom handled the money. That's where I got that side from. But I just loved working with him. And when I went to college back in 1992, I graduated, there was something called a recession. Like, it was hard to get a job back then. I don't know if people can relate today, but back then there was just no jobs. So I said, Dad, I'm going to work in New York City. I went to work for a year. I was working in reinsurance accounting, which is about as exciting as watching paint dry. It was just the worst job ever on 99 John Street. I hated it. I said, Dad, can we open up a restaurant? So we ended up opening one up in 1994. We're talking a long time ago. But listen, Josh, I loved it until, 2007. My dad passed away. And at that point, I just said to myself, am I living his dream, or am I living my dream? And then you know what happened in 08? The Great Recession comes. I'm sitting there with 4 kids at the time going, bro, I'm not making enough money here to pay for the family. I'm working harder, I'm making less. I'm blaming everybody. And I think the pivotal turning point for me was picking up T. Harv Eker's book. I read The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And when I read the book, initially, I wanted to punch Harv in the face. Really, I just thought, who is this guy? He doesn't know me. But then I read a little bit deeper, and I'm like, holy crap, your fruits are in your roots. he's right. It's all about responsibility. I'm blaming everybody but myself. Everything
Mm.
I've done up to this point in my life is from the actions that I've taken. Well, that's great news because if I start taking different actions, maybe I can create some kind of wealth. And that book led me to mentoring, led me to my business partner Jake, led me to down a different career path. And I have a lot of gratitude for reading that book and gratitude for listening to T. Harv Ecker's message at that point in my life.
Man, you touched on so many things I want to go back to here.
Sure.
You've really kind of framed this up as the foundational thinking, or what I might call the inside game of money, right? You
Mhm.
described your father as being willing to be entrepreneurial, but your mother being the one who is handling the money. You described this kind of transformational moment at age 8, and then finding this book that led you to take full responsibility for where you were in your life, as bad as that might have tasted at the moment. And
Mhm.
then you realized, oh, if I want my life to get better, my habits, my routines have to get better before the money comes. So let's talk a little bit about the money game, or the inside game of money. How do you think about the psychology, the roots, the upbringing, and how it affects our thinking and belief system around money?
I read the book by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money, and that led me to money coaching because I'm like, holy crap, it all has to do with your relationship with money. When I had a terrible relationship with money, when I had that scarcity, when I had that fear, I wasn't, what's the word that I can say? I wasn't attracting money. And then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, I started to understand that money is just a result, right? The more
Mm-hmm.
work you put in, the more value you create. Listen, Josh, when I opened the restaurant, this is one of the biggest mistakes I think that entrepreneurs make. We opened a business, or at least I did. And I think a lot of other entrepreneurs out there, they open a business to provide for the family. That's what I did. Instead of saying to myself, why don't I provide value for my customers? The more value that I provide for my customers, the more money that I'll be able to make for my family. I did it in the inverse. And when I started looking at multifamily and apartments, I'm like, you know what? I'm only looking at it from my perspective. How about buying these properties, fixing these properties up, making them more livable, making them safe, making them comfortable to live in? And then on the flip side, you have employees, you have investors, and you have those residents. If you can take care of those three people first, then you're creating value. Then guess what? You're going to make more money. And you do that at scale with 2,000 apartments, you'll make even more money. I think the problem with money nowadays, it's such an emotionally charged topic. And most of us, I'd say the vast majority of Americans, have grown up in households where money was not talked about. It was talked about negatively. There was always negative connotations to it. And we have these what we call money traumas early on in life that we bring throughout our childhood and into our adulthood. And we're making these decisions unconsciously about money.
Helps if I take my mute button off. So what I said, let's start that over. I'll say it in English this time with the mute button off. From your mouth to God's ears. In other words, when you were sharing that story, it so resonated with my story. I
Mhm.
grew up with a very, let's just say meager, that'll be a friendly word, a meager upbringing. And I was very fearful for the first 10, 15, maybe even 20 years of my life around money because I knew what it felt like not to have money. But there was some shift. There was a moment where I moved psychologically from fear to curiosity. And that curiosity turned into this ravenous propulsion, if you will, to understand, why do people have money? How do they get it? How do they act and behave differently than the people who don't have money? And that's worked out pretty well. I want to just add one more comment. You've mentioned several books that changed the way you look at life. And I
Mhm.
find it interesting when I talk to people who have money, they all have books that they've read that has left a stamp on their life. It's
Mhm.
changed their perspective. When I talk to people who don't have money, they don't have those same stories. They haven't read those same books. So just kind of an
Mhm.
interesting corollary I thought I'd bring up there.
Josh, when was that moment in your life when you became curious? Do you remember the specific time, what you were feeling, what you were listening to, what you heard when you said, "Wow, I want to become curious"? Do you remember that time in your life?
I remember the mile marker that I was at.
Mm.
I could take you there right now from my home. I know not only the moment, the second, but exactly where I was. And that was my grandmother had given me Not Think and Grow Rich, Robert Kiyosaki's book that is escaping me. Help me.
Rich Dad, Poor
Rich
Dad.
Dad, Poor Dad. Thank you. And I was listening to the chapter around the cash flow quadrant. And Robert was saying, and my grandmother gave me this book on tape, and she said, "Don't come to my house for Thanksgiving until you've listened to this." Your
Mm.
mother was the money matriarch. My grandmother was the money matriarch. And it was the
Mm.
greatest gift she could have ever given me. And when I heard Robert describe that cash flow quadrant, that the poor people hang out on the left in the employed and small business, and the wealthy people hang out in the right, the big business owners and investors. And then he went on to talk about how they pay less taxation and all of the benefits of those things and compounding, making your money work for you and leverage. I was like, holy shit, I get it. I understand the plan, how to be wealthy. Just stack cash flow producing assets, wait long enough period of time, and I can see the path for the first time in my life.
There's a lot of stuff that you said in there, and you're taking, I don't want to say it for granted that you made the shift, but there's one reason, or actually a couple of reasons why people find it hard to make the shift. The first one is you actually had to understand that unconsciously you needed to leave your tribe. Your tribe
Mm.
did not think like that. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that me and my wife, when we got married, she came from one tribe of hardworking, blue collar, not worrying about money. Money was never enough. To myself, who was a little bit more entrepreneurial, that saved, that had assets. She had to leave that tribe, and it was very hard. And she felt a lot of shame unconsciously, and she
Mm.
didn't understand. So, what ended up happening in our relationship was in money coaching, we call these money archetypes. I became sort of the tyrant of money. I became sort of fearful, domineering, and she became the innocent, where she's like, Gino, I trust you. You take care of it. It's all up to you. Only until the past couple of years have we been able to reconcile the relationship. But what you said, it's hard for a lot of people to do because there's shame around money. They don't feel as if they deserve it. So even if they know it logically, yeah, buy cash producing assets. Well, if they felt shame, if their tribe is going to look down upon them, if they've heard that rich people are greedy and evil, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, because I personally think money does not corrupt you, it reveals you. If
Yes.
you believe that, all of a sudden you start buying cash producing assets, and your friends and your family members are going to go, look at Josh, the rich guy, and then all of a sudden you feel this uncertainty. And then all of a sudden, you need to lean back onto your values. What are your values? If you value cash producing assets, if you value financial freedom, if you value control and responsibility, then you'll be able to make that shift. But if you don't, and you're afraid of losing your tribe, and you still have shame around it, and you don't understand, it's going to be really hard for you to make that shift. Does that make sense?
100% makes sense. And I want to just pull on this string a little bit more, Gino.
Okay.
So let's say that somebody listening to this is going, whoa, that sounds like me. I am very fearful of being the one who transcends my family and my tribe and breaks out.
Mm.
And I've got some money trauma, I think is how you described it.
Yes.
What is the process of getting curious around that and rewiring one's brain?
That's a great question. That's exactly why I got into money coaching. I would tell everyone to go check out the Money Coaching Institute. That's the lady, Deborah Price. She's been doing this for almost 30 years. And her process, she's got a 4-step process. The first thing that I would do if you're listening to this is what we call a money bio. I can send out a set of questions to anybody that wants to ask themselves these questions. And what I did, because I got coached before I actually got certified, you go back into your history. And you go back into any of these memories. My first memory of money, I was 5 years old, going to the grocery store with my grandmother, who was Italian, who couldn't speak English. And at the time, there were no credit cards. So we go into the grocery store and I see a bag of toy soldiers. And I'm like, Grandma, can we buy these soldiers? And I remember her saying, Gino, we don't have the money. When we go back home, when your mom comes, we'll come back to the store and we'll buy these soldiers. Now, I remember leaving, crying, not buying the soldiers. I don't remember going back and buying those soldiers. So that at the age of 5, people may be saying, well, what big deal is that? Well, at the age of 5, you can't reconcile. You don't understand what that even means. I'm already creating a pattern or a belief in my mind that, hey, if I don't buy something right then and there, I'm going to lose it. There's scarcity. I'm not going to be able to afford it. Now flip over to my, memory at the age of 8, where I'm 8 years old. I go to work for my dad. At the end of the day, we come home in front of the family. He's got a $2. He hands it over to me, and everyone's clapping, going, good job, Gino. At the age of 8, in my mind, the impression is work hard, make money, people are going to love you. And then all of a sudden, that's why I got into the restaurant business, is because I felt love there. I felt that, hey, you work hard, there's going to be results. That's what you need to do if you're listening to this. And there was a lot of traumas along the way. And as I started putting this together, Josh, I started to notice a pattern of positive, empowering beliefs where we were great at saving, but there was also a lot of negative and disempowering beliefs and patterns. And what I would say to anybody, look at those negative ones and see which ones you want to start working on and start challenging them. It doesn't take money to make money. That's what I thought. It may, but it doesn't have to be your money. And money doesn't grow on trees, really. You know how much money is circulating in the economy every day? Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. These are all beliefs that I was raised upon. And once I started looking at the patterns and the beliefs, I was like, hey, I can challenge that. It doesn't have to be that way.
82% of entrepreneurs say that the lack of access to capital is holding them back from growing their business. And worse than that, up to a third of all businesses that go out of business this year say they've done so because of a lack of access to capital. That's why we created the Entrepreneur Capital Lines of Credit. If you're an entrepreneur and you need access to capital, click into the link in the description and get your pre-approval now. Yeah. So, I'm thinking in today's distracted world, Gino, people don't spend a lot of time or enough time thinking. And I'm thinking back to this 6-hour drive that I had to my grandmother's house on the way for Thanksgiving. And I remember listening to that whole book on tape. And I remember having hours to think and hours to digest. And it was almost meditation, when you're driving for 6 hours. And I remember after certain chapters in that book, I would just, these were literal tapes, people. So you had to hit eject and you had to get in the back seat. Then you had to get the other tape out. So in between the tapes, I remember having, an hour to just think and digest. That doesn't happen today because the phone would have went off 27 times. You would have had internet or satellite radio. You would have had all these pings and dings. And so perhaps there's a deeper part of this where if you haven't reconciled that money trauma, maybe you need to do some inner work and you need to create some space where you can go on a 2-hour walk and you leave your phone at home and you're just out in nature and you're thinking about these moments that Gino mentioned 5 and 8. I have a memory at 9. I can tell you where I am and what I was thinking about money and trauma. So I think creating the space to look inside and then stare into those things may be an important first step here.
It's interesting. I want to jump out of my skin right now at what you said, only because it's really hard to do the work. But as my friend Phil McKernan says, it's a lot harder not to do the work. And the problem is we can make excuses. I would challenge anybody listening to this. Why is it that you need to be busy all the time? Why is it that you can't disconnect for a few minutes? That's a really tough, challenging question. A lot of us, including myself, may find it uncomfortable sometimes just to sit with our thoughts. We have to actually ask and answer that question to ourselves, right? That's the fundamental problem that a lot of people have right now. It's that they don't like to be alone with their own thoughts, and there needs to be a lot of inner work that happens, and it's not easy. It's really challenging, and then you start looking at these things, and then you start feeling shame around those experiences that you had, and it's okay. And you have to learn how to look at those, try to heal from those, and release those. Because if you don't, it's going to be so hard to reconcile the relationship you have with money. And that one at 9 years old, share that memory with me. I'd love to hear that memory.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really two memories, and I believe they were very closely related in time. And one of them was just, opening a fridge and realizing there's not enough food to get through this week,
Wow.
and didn't know where that, where it was going to come from. So there was this pervasive feeling of scarcity,
Hmm.
uncertainty around where we were going to live, where the next meal was going to come from. I'm living in downtown Los Angeles, and there's gunshots going off, and Sir 13 gang members on my way to school that I'm getting beat up by. Like, it was a pretty rough youthful experience. And then at the same time, like the ultimate dichotomy, right? That's the life I'm living, getting my ass kicked, don't know where we're going to live or where the food's going to come from. I remember walking downtown Los Angeles, and this is like so crystal clear to me, Gino, putting my hands up against this glass on this 50-story high-rise building and watching the Ferraris drive by and just going like, where does all this money come from? Like, what don't I understand about this universe? So the
Hmm.
fear actually turned into a ravenous hunger, which I'm super grateful for. I would not rewrite those early years for all the money in the world, because it created that ravenous hunger that I have today. And it's why you and I are talking.
Hmm. And it's incredible that you made the shift, but there's so many people out there that they don't make the shift. That fear and that scarcity, that anxiety, it's unconscious, and you're making decisions today based upon that 9-year-old little boy. Not you, but the average person, where they go into the grocery store with their parents and they're constantly hearing, "We can't afford that. We can't afford that. Put that back." I mean, I have a message. Basically, it's very similar, but it was weird because this is about 10 years ago. My daughter, who's 19, was about 8 years old at the time. And, you know, I've got 5 kids. I'm shopping for clothes. And this is why it's important, because you need to speak to your children about this as well. We're in Gymboree. She gets a pair of pajamas and she puts them on the counter. And I look over and I'm like, I can't believe, almost like I can't believe I got to buy another pair. Now, I didn't mean anything by that other than, man, I've already got $500 worth of clothes. Do we need to buy another one? She took that as, wow, I'm not worthy. I mean, dad doesn't want to buy this for me. And, we had a conversation a few weeks ago about it. And she's like, that may be why every time I go online, I actually have to double check myself and say, do I really need to buy this? Am I worthy of this? And it's really wild to think that a little glance or a look at a little child can have such, I don't want to say irreparable, but if it's not met head on, or you don't resolve that, that can actually go into her, adulthood, and can
Mm-hmm.
can really mess up any decisions that she makes going forward. Should she buy this house? Should she buy this car? Is she worthy to do this? And it's really interesting that there's so many things in life and so many decisions we make and actions we take that we don't even think about. And that's why it's important to do that money bio. You have a memory of money every year. I did one from the age of 5 all the way up until the age of, up until this year. A lot of memories. And like you said, Josh, you need to sit there. It took me a good 6 or 7 hours to sit there and write it all out. But once I did, it felt a little refreshing, to be honest with you, and a little enlightening. And to see all of the different pivots and all the different junctures in my life where I was able to progress, and to say, like you saw, wow, in '08, this is what helped me out. In 2011 with Jake, this is what helped me out. And also to be able to share that with my kids, it was really powerful.
I love the story. So, to make this actionable for everybody, let me just share three takeaways.
Sure.
If you're realizing that you may have some of this money trauma, I would suggest three things. Number one, sit down with a journal and start writing down your earliest memories around money. And they should be in that 5 to 10 year old range. And start asking curious questions. If you do that exercise and you run into a jam, you're like, the creative thoughts aren't coming. Here's an idea. Go on to ChatGPT and say, I think I have some money trauma and I've got some weird considerations around wealthy people. Could you interview me and help me uncover my money trauma and the issues I have around trauma? And just let ChatGPT interview you and see where that goes. Now you've got some money trauma cards out on the table. Now zoom out and go take a couple-hour walk. And you may need to do this a few times. Get into nature, get some sagebrush, get some trees, leave your phone at home, you and a bottle of water, and start thinking about these things and how you can shift them from little scarcity boy to, wow, I wonder what they know that I don't know, right? Like try to start using, instead of that money trauma being a retardant, start to use it as an accelerator and give you leverage on the direction you want to go. And I think the third thing I was going to say around that was, if you're not reading books like Gino has mentioned, like I've mentioned, for me, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was Think and Grow Rich. Those are the two most transformative books in my life. If you're not reading those and you don't have those bases of knowledge, consider going down that path, because that'll create curiosity and it'll create belief that you can get from here to there.
Mm-hmm.
Anything
Josh,
else?
yeah, I want to mention another thing. I just want to spend another minute or two, if you don't mind, on the emotional aspect of money, because I think it's important, because we can all think of this from the logical part and all, but you're seeing what's going on in society right now. You can't have a conversation with somebody because their emotions overtake them. And all of a sudden, they can't make decisions based on the rational thought. And I think if people understand how the brain is structured, you have the neocortex or the frontal lobe, which is actually the highest part of your brain. The limbic system is the emotional part, and then we have the most primitive part of the brain. Well, when we're getting these messages, it's going through the primitive part of the brain. If you don't allow it to process and get to the neocortex, the frontal part, where you're actually looking at it rationally, you need emotions in life. But when you're making decisions based on money from that emotional standpoint, most of the time you're going to be making mistakes. And in money coaching, there's something that we call archetypes. An archetype is a character inside of you, the way you act, feel, and think about money. And there's 8 of them. I'm going to go through them really quick, because I think this is really important for people to understand the different archetype that they're actually making decisions based on money. There's the warrior archetype, which sounds like what you embodied at the age of 9 and what I've embodied over the last 15 years. Disciplined, hardworking, going to get it done. They're going to take massive action. They're the person who's in the driver's seat, driving the car. Right next to them is what we call the magician. The magician is the person who transforms reality. They're the ones that, coupled with the warrior, they know that that's their mission. They're on board. They know what they got to do. They know what their sole purpose is. The two of those guys put together are going to make great decisions. In the back seat is what we call the creator artist. The creator artist is the person who's the creative type. They love to do podcasts. They love to create. Now, unfortunately, they're not good with money. They're not materialistic. So if your creator artist is making decisions based on money, that's not the person you want. You want the creator artist fueling the warrior. Now, in the back seat, in the trunk, you have the 5 other archetypes. You have the fool, who's an optimist, but at the same time is jumping one venture to the next. You have the innocent. You have the victim. You have the martyr. That's 7 right there. There's one more. What's the last one? Oh, and I said the fool. There's 8 total. Now, they're not good or bad in any instance. You want the fool to jump out every now and again because you need the optimist. You need to have fun. But if the fool is constantly driving, what's going to happen to the car and to your decisions? You're not going to have a really great decision based solely on the fool. So if you understand where you are with your archetypes and you're able to lock into the one you need at that particular time, like I want creator artist. Creator artist fuels my day. I love writing. I love podcasts. I used to sing opera. We need that, right? If we're just warrior and we're just, it's not going to be fulfilling. So understanding those archetypes can really make you help you understand of which person right now, which archetype is making the decision. Is it the innocent or is it the victim? Like I had a lot of victim in 2007 and 2008. And if the victim is making your money decisions, guess what? They are not going to be good decisions.
Yeah, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, you cannot attract abundance from an energetic state of scarcity.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. That's great.
amen. Amen. Okay, man, this has been so fun, Gino. Let's get tactical now from the
Sure.
inside game to the outside game. You built a portfolio of over 2,000 multifamily units. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about like how that structure is held. Do you have a bunch of other investors you partner with? Like, how did you get there? But maybe tell it in the fashion of a story. Like, here was what I did in the first 5 years. Here's what I
Sure.
did in the next 5 years. Here's what I did in the next 5 years. Like, kind of tell a story of how you got pizza guy to 2,000 units and the phases, if you will. If you could break down the phases of that journey, I think that would be really helpful.
Sure. The pizza guy in 2008 was frustrated. I realized that I was moving away from pain instead of moving towards pleasure. And that's what
Mm.
motivated me. And I noticed that most people who make a shift in their lives and transform their lives, they're either in a painful spot where they need to change or they're really crushing it and just want to, I guess, take it to the next level. I wasn't in that mid comfortable range. I had passed that. I was 38 years old. I felt as if I was broke. I felt as if I was going to a job where my kids see me going to this job, coming home, not fulfilled, being grumpy. I needed that shift. And that's when everything changed. I decided to go out and get mentored because I didn't know really how to invest in real estate. I didn't know what a cap rate was. I didn't know how to attract capital. I didn't know what a cash on cash was. So I first needed to learn the business. And then from there, I said, I can't do single family homes because I've already got a job. So let me keep the restaurant full time. That's going to pay for my living expenses. And as I start building this portfolio, whatever money I make in the portfolio, I'm just going to continue to roll into the portfolio. And in our first deal, Jake and I, it took us 18 months to find the first deal in 2013. We bought a 25 unit property. It was me, Jake, and my brother Mark. 10% seller financing. People are saying, well, where'd you get the money? I did have some money to start, but we also got seller financing. On the second deal, 3 months after that, I brought in another partner. His name is Mike. Excellent dude, really smart business guy, had a strong balance sheet. From there, we just kept buying deals. We brought about an average of two properties a year. We were able to refinance the portfolio. By 2016, we had refinanced out, believe it or not, about $8 million from the portfolio. We had done really well in those 3 or 4 years. But I was able to reinvest those proceeds into the portfolio instead of living on them. And in 2016, 5 years after I started buying with Jake, I decided, hey, I'm going to go into the real estate full time. I have enough money coming in. I left the restaurant. In 2018, we started to quote unquote run out of money. And that's where Jake said, I think we need to start syndicating and raising capital for our deals. So we did 3 deals between 2018 and 2019 that were syndicated. We brought in investors. We bought these deals with investors. Then we decided we don't really like investors. We like to own our own deals. I mean, at some point, we just wanted to Josh, honestly, we just wanted 100 units when we started. That's all we wanted. We're like, if we get 100 units, brother, we are set. So we're at this point in 2019 where we've got about 1,300 units, and we're like, you know what? Syndication is not for us. We always have to keep hunting for the next deal. We have to satisfy our investors. We don't want that. We decided to sell out of our syndication. So in 2022, we exited the last syndication. And since then, we've just been using our own capital to buy deals. Now, there's no one size fits all. I would tell everybody listening to this, learn every strategy there is, whether it's seller financing, whether it's partnering up doing JV deals, whether you're going to syndicate and raise capital, master lease options, whatever it is, you just need to use the tool in your toolbox in whatever part of the market cycle it is, and ultimately whatever goals you're trying to accomplish. I didn't want to own thousands and thousands of units. All I wanted was to be able to build a portfolio that had great assets, that was easier to manage, that we can control ourselves. And what we focus on is profit per unit. We wanted to see the profitability of the portfolio and not focus just on fees.
Okay, so you jumped from where most real estate investors start, which is in the single family world.
Yep.
You jumped right into multifamily. Your first deal was 25 units. You guys put together. Do you remember what you paid for that property, by the way, Gino?
We still own it. And
You
it's
do?
interesting. We just, yeah, we're our exit strategy is to buy really good deals in our market, which is excellent. That is population is growing. When we bought this asset, it was doing $350 per month in rents for a one bedroom. We paid $700,000 for this asset. It was a rough asset, 25 units. So on what is that? What is that? Like around $25,000 per unit. We've refinanced it once. The property looks actually beautiful right now. We've been cash flowing between $8,000 and $10,000 per month. It's probably worth $2.5 million right now, about $100,000 a unit. And that's the power of real estate. You don't have to do a ton of deals. You just have to do a couple of deals that are really good and have some patience. Wait for these deals to continue to grow. And if you need to exit the deal, but you like the deal where the market is, we just decided to refinance. That was our exit from the deal, and we were able to continue to hold this deal.
It's so funny. We started in single family, but the first multifamily we bought was an 8 unit building
That's
right
great.
downtown next to the Capitol Hill. Beautiful view over the Great Salt Lake. Like the sunsets are just breathtaking. We
Yeah.
100% financed it from a woman who had built it with her husband. They'd owned it since I think the building was built in the 50s, and they'd owned it for that entire period of time. And he'd passed away, and she was
Mhm.
just like, I still want cash flow each month, but
Yes.
I can't manage this property anymore. And you could tell the deferred maintenance was stacking up. So we 100% financed it. We paid her on a note for 5 years. We worked our tails off trying to get that thing, capital improvements to get it caught up. Then we caught a break. Interest rates went from 8% to 5%. We refinanced the
Oh,
loan, and it's been a beautiful cash flow ever since. And I want to ask you this question, when we bought that building, this is year 2000, I believe, the monthly rents were about 275 a month. Now they're 1695 plus we get
oh my.
storage and parking. Do you
Ah.
remember the rents that you
Oh
got
yeah.
on that building versus now?
I mean, gross rents were about 13 grand a month. So I mean, on average, they were like 325, 350, maybe 400.
Yeah.
Rents right now are $1,100 plus rubs, and they're one bedroom little cottages. So they're always rented out. It's an easier property to manage for us. And like I said, the basis is really low. And for any investor out there, they need to understand there's multiple strategies going on. Some assets are great to cash flow. Some assets are great to extract equity. If you're just starting out, the goal is not cash flow, people. The goal is to create equity, to be able to pull out, to be able to put into assets that cash flow. If you have no equity, your job is to build your equity up. And then you use that equity to put into deals that actually cash flow. I think people have a misnomer where I'm just going to quit my job and go and no, the deal, like I said, it took me a good 3 or 4 years before I had that cash flow snowball going where I was able to pull the equity out, but then put it into other deals. And if that means buying a couple single family homes, flipping those, maybe doing a little bit of land banking, buying yourself a 3 unit, whatever that takes, your goal is to actually create that equity to go into repurpose it into assets that will cash flow for you.
Let's go deeper on that. So I
Sure.
think people understand the concept of flipping in the single family world. I buy a house for 150,000. I put 50,000 in, so I'm in at 200,000, and I sell it for 250, right? So now I re-get
Yes.
the 50,000 I put in plus my 50,000 profit. Let's pretend you didn't have to pay taxes on that. Now you can move, and let's pretend you 1031 exchange it. Then I move that $100,000 into the next property, and you just kind of rinse and repeat, and the snowball builds with capital until you can
Yes.
put a nice down payment that creates that cash flow. But explain to folks how you do it in the multifamily world. Give us an example of that.
It's very similar. That's one of the reasons why we did not like the syndication model, because the syndication model, you are collecting investors. investors. You are their fiduciary. So it's not what Gino wants or what Josh wants. It's what's best for the investors. And
Mm.
most of the time, it is actually exiting the deal and achieving a certain internal rate of return. As a cash flow investor, as a long-term holder, I don't really care about IRR. I don't. I care about cash on cash. But as a syndicator and as having investors, the goal, you saw what happened between 2017 and 2022. Every 18 months, these deals were getting what we call value added. They were increasing NOI, they were increasing rents, and they were flipping out of them. So what a syndicator's model is, hey, I'm going to present this deal. I'm going to create fees for myself and for my company. I'm not really going to get that much cash flow with the hold of the deal. At the end of the deal, the goal is to sell it, pull the money out, and to go find another deal. For me, it's like I'm killing the golden goose. I've got this asset that is stabilized, it's doing really well, and people, they fall in love with that. But if you don't 1031 it, you've got to pay taxes on it. But like I said, the goal of the syndicator really is to create equity on the back end. And a lot of the reasons why a lot of these syndicators are having problems right now is a lot of that equity wasn't repurposed into the next deal, or they overpaid on the next deal and now they're stuck. So it's a very similar model. Your whole goal in multifamily, if you're looking to flip, buying that 8 unit, you buy it for a certain price point. You're trying to add value. Now, if you can increase the property's value by at least 25%, you could refinance out basically all the money that you put down, but you need to add value in that property. And there's one of two things I think you need to think of when you're looking at an exit strategy. It's ultimately, what is your goal with this property? For us on that 25 unit, we wanted to buy a property at that basis in a great market. The exit strategy was to stabilize it and then to refinance out the proceeds and use it for the next deal. Now, if we had sold it back then, you'd have seen how much money would have left on the table. But understanding what the exit is. So if you're going in for that 8 unit that you bought, you stabilize it, then you say to yourself, hey, I'm selling this deal, but that 8 units, you can possibly buy a 15 unit. And then a year later or 2 years later, that 15 unit, you've created a lot of value. You go out and you look and you hunt for a 30 unit. That's how you flip properties in multifamily.
In your Jake and Gino podcast that I listened to this morning, you made the point that you need to have a strategy.
Yes.
You're not just oh, Bitcoin's up, I'll buy that. Silver's up, I'll buy that. It has to be part of a comprehensive strategy. And what you're explaining is, look, the goal is get a trophy asset with great tenants that you can keep forever and just sit back and watch inflation push up those rents as your mortgage payment stays the same. Or if you're smart, you refinance as we have interim periods when interest rates go down. And the delta between that inflation-driven cash flow and your mortgage payment gets bigger and bigger and bigger the longer of period of time. So if that's the goal, then how do we get there? Well,
That can be one goal, Josh. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that can be one goal. But how about you, Josh, with that 8 unit property 10 years from now, you selling it on a seller financed installment note? Now, all of a sudden, you're deferring some capital gains because you're not paying the whole thing. You're not getting all the capital. And all of a sudden, you are getting mailbox money. That's true passive income. That's true. So you can actually structure it that way. For me to say, this property 10 years from now that I bought back in 2013, I want to sell it on an installment note. I can sell it on an installment note and get more money per month in passive income than when I'm making cash flow working on it. So there's so many different ways to skin the cat, but that exactly what you mentioned, that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish over the long term. You have this hedge against inflation. You have the fact that, it's not how much money you make, it's really how much you keep of it. And with cost segregation, that's a huge component. There's no irony in the fact that in 2017, the Jobs Act came out and all this cost segregation and all this tax relief and benefits shifted to multifamily. That's when, game on, all of a sudden asset prices started elevating. There's a big tax component to this. So you have to understand that as well. So for us, not selling that property, not having to recapture that, and continuing to buy assets so we continue to, achieve more cost segregation benefits for ourselves, that's part of the strategy that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so we're value add, flipping it, if that's the best way to move some cash into a deal. And then you get to an asset where you're like, I want to hold that forever.
Yes, great
Then
point.
you
I love that.
hold that asset for long periods of time. When rates go down, you refinance, you pull some
Yes.
equity out, which is 100% tax free, and then you deploy that to buy another property. That's a strategy. How you
Yes.
get there might be different approaches, but your point in the video I watched this morning, don't lose, you may do different tactics to make the strategy happen, but don't lose sight of the strategy. So I think
Yes.
that was a great point. I just wanted to bring that into this conversation. And my last, we're 5-10 minutes left here. Let's go a little further down this bonus depreciation, cost segregation, and the enhancements that were just brought back with the big, beautiful bill. Tell us a little bit about that in case people kind of understand it at the surface level, but bring it home for us, Gino.
Well, this is interesting because cost segregation is macro accelerated cost recovery. It's a
Mm.
benefit where if people don't understand the tax code was written to stimulate behavior. That's the reality. If, we're talking about rich and poor, 70,000 pages, you go through it, it's offered to anybody who's poor, anybody who's middle class, anybody who's wealthy. If you understand the tax code, it's going to be a big benefit to you for creating wealth. So when I hear in New York City, the proposed governor who may win the race is saying that, hey, we're going to provide housing. I used to go down to Harlem every year for Thanksgiving, for Easter. I would work with a couple of neighborhoods. I've been around government housing. It ain't good. So when I hear people say, oh, this is not fair that rich people get tax breaks, once again, the government knows that they cannot provide housing. They just can't. And it's a reason why Bezos gets massive tax breaks because the government cannot provide or create jobs. Entrepreneurs do that. Apartment owners bring in the capital. We take the risk to provide the housing that the government can't. So cost segregation is incredible because what it does, it segregates out the assets on the property and puts them into buckets. I think it's a 5-year bucket, 10-year bucket, 15-year bucket, and then there's 27 and a half years. You take all the components of the property. I'm looking at a ceiling fan here. That's probably a 15-year. It's fixtures. I'm not sure. You're looking at flooring. You're looking at paint, wiring. You put them into these individual buckets and you're able to depreciate them. Now, it's interesting. You got the ones that 5, 10, and 15 when what you're talking about right now, it was, I think, at 40% depreciation. You could depreciate those first 3 buckets, only 40% of it. They've gone back to 100% bonus depreciation, where you can depreciate those 3 things at 100%. So for argument's sake, if your property is $1 million and the land on that property is 100,000, you can't depreciate land. It's really, you can depreciate that asset $900,000. Old time, if you don't do a cost segregation study, you depreciate $900,000 over 27 and a half years. So you're only getting it per year for 27 and a half years. What cost segregation does, it allows you to really maximize it and front load it. On average, you take about 20 to 25% of that 900 grand, and you can depreciate between 150 and $200,000 that property day one. I mean, that's incredible. And then obviously you continue to depreciate along for the rest of the life of the asset. But that bonus depreciation allows you to recapture it a lot quicker. You're getting a lot more of your money back. You're able to take that off as losses on your income. And that's how you're able to continue to be able to buy because you're paying less in taxes. The money that was supposed to go to the government, so the government is smart and does a lot of smart things. That money that was going to go to the government that you're going to piss away and they're going to give to NGOs is going to stay in Gino's pocket, and Gino knows what to do with the money because Gino's going to go out and hunt and buy another property that's going to create more cost segregation, that's going to be allow me to defer my taxes, but at the same time creating value for the community that the government can't do.
Super well said. Yeah, I mean, we have a saying in our household, you either buy real estate or you pay taxes, but you do not need to do both. And I ask my wife all the time, I'm like, hey, you want to buy another property? You want to write a check to the IRS? Which one do you want to do? She's like, oh shit, we'll buy another property.
Not a hard choice, right?
Not a hard choice. Gino, this has been a lot of fun, man. I want to leave you with a closing thought to inspire or give us additional insight here in closing. And then, of course, like, where are all the platforms where people can find you and Jake and the great mentorship that you guys offer?
The inspiring thought to me would be just take a break every day and read. read 20 minutes a day. If you read 20 minutes a day, you'll probably knock out a book every 2 weeks. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 25 books a year. And if you're reading 25 books and whether you're listening to them, what's your biggest mode? Are you a visual person? Are you an auditory person? Are you a kinesthetic person? I can't listen to audibles. I have to read books. So understanding that, but just take 15 or 20 minutes, work on personal development. If you're in the real estate space, stop reading real estate books, read personal development, read mindset books. I think that's what really helped me out because real estate's not really that challenging. It's mechanical. It's some formulas. That's not the important part. You have to understand your mindset. You have to understand your relationship with money, the psychology around that. That's really, really important. And I think if you want to learn more, just go to jakeandgino.com. We've got all our podcasts on there. If you want to learn more about investing in real estate, we teach buy right, manage right, finance right. That's the framework I think you were alluding to earlier, because there is frameworks. And what I would say is just find somebody that you resonate with. Find somebody who has success in the space that you're looking for. Start following them, start listening to them. And if you're interested, just take a deeper dive into what that person's doing.
I love the simplicity in that. Buy right, manage right, finance right. I mean, let's not overcomplicate it. If you get those things right, you can get a lot of other shit wrong and you're going to be okay. I imagine, Gino, that there is a framework underneath each one of those that
Absolutely.
you teach and a formula to tell people this is what buy right looks like. This is not. This is what manage looks like. And here's how you do it. And this is what finance right looks like. So just give us just a little bit more, just tease us out a little bit on that framework.
When I was buying real estate as a new investor, all I was looking for was I need a deal. Well, what does that even mean? Like, there's no framework for buying a deal. In buy right, what's your criteria? You need to understand what the criteria for a deal is. You need to have a buy box, 50 to 300 units, median income of $50,000, 2-bedroom townhomes. We love washer dryers. We like certain amenities. We love brick. We're within 3 hours of Knoxville. Now, all of a sudden, I have some type of criteria. I can actually share that within brokers. It gives me some credibility. Understanding that's the buy right. That's one little portion of the framework, but understanding the buy right is so important. Then the finance right is, are you using a credit union? Are you using a community bank? Because financing in multifamily and commercial is a lot different than residential. Understanding that component and the exit strategy is really important. And the managed portion is the wheel of what we call the wheelbarrow. We envision a wheelbarrow with two back legs, buy and finance. Those are both fixed. The wheel of the wheelbarrow is in motion, and that is the managed right. That's systems, processes, people, culture. Diving into that is important, and understanding that real estate is a business, whether you're buying a single family home, whether you're buying a multifamily, self-storage. If you look at it from that lens, the mistake that I made early on, also not looking at it as a business. If you start looking at it as a business and treating it as a business with the systems and the processes, you're going to have a lot larger chance of success with that asset.
Mic drop. Gino, you're a heck of a guest. This has been a lot of fun. I hope to have you back on the Infinite Financial Freedom podcast sometime soon, my friend.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it, brother.